They were burned alive for saying the world was an illusion. What if I told you a hidden teaching, kept secret for centuries, burned in flames, and silenced with swords, held a key to such deep spiritual freedom that the church tried to wipe it out completely? In the misty hills of southern France, there once lived a group of mystics called the Cathars. They guarded a kind of knowledge so clear, so freeing, that it shook the very power of the church. To their enemies, they were dangerous heretics. But to those who listened, they shared a truth too powerful for the world to handle. These weren't just any believers. The Cathars saw the physical world as a kind of trap, a fake creation made by a darker force, not a loving God, but a false creator who kept people stuck in pain and confusion. They didn't follow the church's rules, titles, or fear-based teachings. Instead, they spoke of connecting directly to the divine, of cleansing the soul from within, and living simply. Their message felt like the old wisdom of early Gnostics and even Eastern sages. But their path was risky. In the 1200s, a brutal crusade was started, not to take land, but to erase this truth that couldn't be controlled. Whole towns were wiped out, books were burned, and thousands of people were killed in the name of faith. The Cathars disappeared, or so it seemed. But their wisdom wasn't lost. Pieces of it still exist today, hidden in old texts, stories passed down, and a quiet inner knowing that never fully died. This video will explore the secret teachings of the Cathars, not as a boring history lesson, but as living truths for those ready to look deeper. We'll look at who the Cathars really were, what they believed, and why their ideas scared the powerful. We'll break down their view of the world, a split between light and matter, the illusion of control, and the deep inner work they believed in. Then, we'll bring those ancient ideas into today's world with simple insights and practices you can use on your own path. So light a candle, take a deep breath, and get ready to step into a forgotten time, when truth was shared in whispers, and the soul wasn't seen as broken or lost, but as something already whole. To learn about the Cathars is to walk a risky path through the hidden parts of history, where stories were twisted, and the winners told their own version. The Cathars called themselves the good people, bonds, and they didn't think they were rebels. They believed they were remembering something true. The Cathars appeared in the 11th and 12th centuries in the Languedoc region of France. It was a land of poets, stone castles, and deep spiritual searching. But their beliefs went much further back, to the early Gnostic groups in the first centuries after Jesus. Gnosticism was a mystical path that grew alongside early Christianity. It taught that the world wasn't made by the real God, but by a lower being, the Demiurge. This being, often linked to the God of the Old Testament, was seen as a blind creator who thought he was the only power, trapping bits of the divine, human souls, inside physical bodies and matter. The Cathars saw the same idea. To them, the world wasn't broken because of human sin, but because of a mistake in creation. The soul wasn't guilty. It was taken. So salvation didn't come from sacrifice or church rituals. It came from remembering where we really come from, far beyond this world. This went against what the Roman Church taught. The Church said only it could offer grace, through its priests, rules, and rituals. But the Cathars didn't accept the Church's power. They said no to water baptism, no to the Eucharist, and they didn't worship the cross. To them, Christ wasn't God in human form, but a divine messenger who never fully entered this broken world. His death on the cross wasn't part of some plan. It was a tragedy, carried out by the rulers of this world. This wasn't just about different beliefs. It was a full-blown spiritual uprising. What made it even more radical was how the Cathars rejected all worldly power. They wouldn't swear oaths, didn't support war, and saw wealth, including that of the church, and religious titles as chains that kept people stuck. They chose to live simply, often poor, and followed a strict way of life. The most devoted among them, called the perfecti, stayed celibate, didn't eat animal products, and spent their lives in prayer, healing, and peace. But they didn't hide away. They walked among the people, offering healing, spiritual guidance, and a sacred rite called the consolamentum, which they believed reconnected the soul with the divine. Their message drew more than just the poor. Nobles, thinkers, and even some church leaders, tired of corruption, were drawn to them. Whole communities embraced the Cathar way. At one point, it wasn't a small fringe group, it was a thriving spiritual culture. That's when everything changed. In 1208, after a papal envoy was killed, something the Cathars never supported, Pope Innocent III called for the Albigensian Crusade. What followed was one of the deadliest church-led purges in history. For over 20 years, Cathar towns like Béziers and Carcassonne were attacked. People were killed, men, women, and children, with no care for who believed what. A church leader even said, "Kill them all, God will know his own." That one sentence showed how far they would go to crush anything that threatened their power. Even after the battles ended, the Inquisition kept hunting the remaining Cathars. Their books were burned. Their names were erased. But the light they carried didn't fully go out. Why were they seen as such a threat? Because they dared to say that no one needed permission to know God. They believed something burns inside you that no church could give or take away. They remembered something the world had tried to bury, that God is pure light, with no darkness at all. And that same light lives within you. To see through the eyes of the Cathars is to shift how you see everything, not just religion, but reality itself. It means learning to see through the surface, to what's really there. Their teachings weren't just religious ideas. They were a deep way of understanding life. At the heart of their belief was duality, but not the usual good versus bad story. Their dualism was big, cosmic, and it echoed the ideas of ancient Gnostics, Zoroastrians, and even Eastern mystics. The Cathars believed two forces ruled the universe. One was the God of light, the true divine source. The other was the ruler of this world, a fake creator who built the material world to trap souls. Picture it like this: you are a flame trapped in a glass jar. The jar is your body, your wants, your thoughts, and the weight of the material world. But the flame inside, that's your real self. It's bright, endless, and free. The Cathars taught that each person holds a spark of the divine inside them, caught in this world through a huge cosmic trick. They believed the physical world, with all its pain and decay, wasn't made by the true God but by a false one. This false God, the Demiurge, created the illusion of life to catch souls and keep them locked in bodies and desires. That's why the Cathars couldn't believe in the incarnation. They didn't think the pure God of light would step into this broken world of matter. For them, Christ wasn't a man in flesh, but a spiritual being who only seemed human, sent to wake people up. He didn't die to save us from sin. He came to reveal the trap we were stuck in. The Cathars didn't believe we were born sinful. They believed we were born into forgetting. Their message wasn't about guilt. It was about remembering. Waking up meant seeing through the lies of this world, the pull of power, money, the body, and fear, and remembering who you really are, a being of light, like a star fallen from a higher realm, now searching for the way back home. But the inner journey wasn't easy. The world, in their view, was a maze. Every craving, every false belief, every worldly leader was another string tying the soul to a cycle of rebirth. They believed in reincarnation, something the mainstream church rejected. Unlike the church, which said you get one life followed by judgment, the Cathars believed the soul came back again and again until it became pure. The soul, they believed, would keep coming back, trapped in the cycle of matter. To break free, one needed deep inner discipline. Not just belief, but gnosis, a kind of direct, inner awakening. The perfecti, or perfected ones, were those who had seen through the illusion. They went through the consolamentum, a sacred rite that combined baptism, spiritual initiation, and deep transformation into one single act. This wasn't just a symbol. It was a mystical shift, a kind of death to the material world and a rebirth into spirit. After this, the perfecti were seen as living beyond the pull of duality. They gave up eating meat, sex, and violence, believing that such things tied the soul back into worldly karma. But they didn't look down on others. They helped, healed, and guided those around them, like quiet lights in a dark world. This path might seem intense today, but it wasn't based on fear or rejection. It came from love, a love for the light they remembered. And that memory wasn't just about the self. It was a memory of something far greater. The Cathars believed that when all souls were free, the material world would fade like a bad dream. The scattered light would return home. The false world would vanish like morning mist under the sun. That was their vision of the end, not fire and punishment, but a great return. So how does someone even start such a path? What must be done to wake up this gnosis? And how can this ancient path still speak to the hunger for truth we feel today? To the Cathars, truth wasn't handed down. It had to be remembered. And remembering meant breaking through illusions so deep, they felt like reality itself. Their way wasn't for the faint of heart. It called for the courage to look through the surface of the world, not with hate, but with clear vision. They didn't reject the body because they hated it. They saw the physical world like a beautiful, enchanted mirror. Lovely to look at, but also full of tricks that could make the soul forget its own light. Waking up meant learning to tell the difference between what came from true light and what belonged to the world's illusions. This ability to see clearly was at the heart of Catharosis. It wasn't about believing certain ideas. It was about knowing, deep, lived, silent knowing. Like tuning an instrument, the soul had to quiet down, remove the noise, and begin to resonate with divine harmony again. The perfecti were seen as people who had reached that harmony. They didn't claim to be better. In fact, they were known for their humility. But they had turned inward, and kept going. Their lives became clear vessels for the light, and their simple presence could spark that same memory in others. To join this path, one had to go through the consolamentum. But this wasn't just a ritual. It wasn't for show. It was real, powerful, even risky. To receive it was to let go of the world entirely. Some secret circles believe it wasn't just a blessing, it was an energy transfer, a spark passed soul to soul. The one preparing would fast, pray, and stay silent for days. Then, through the laying on of hands by a perfect, something would unlock, something deep in the soul, waiting to be remembered. The Cathars said this act brought the soul in tune with higher realms, breaking the cycle of rebirth and getting the soul ready to return to the light. Afterward, the person was expected to live like a perfect, with honesty, peace, and a life free from power games or material goals. It may sound harsh, but there was wisdom behind it. They saw how power corrupts. They had lived through the pain caused by war, greed, and blind obedience. The Cathars showed a different way, not a perfect world, but a sacred path that moved against the current. A way of life that didn't feed the madness. Even their view of the universe was bold. The Cathars believed that not all spiritual beings were the same. Some helped souls break free. Others pretended to be light, but served the false creator, the Demiurge. Being able to tell the difference, even in the unseen, was crucial. The idea of a fake or misleading light shows up in other spiritual paths too. The Sufis spoke of the nafs al-amra, the part of the self that tricks you. In Buddhism, there's Mara, the tempter who uses illusion. Gnostic stories talk about forces that mess with how we see the world. All these point to one clear truth: not everything that shines is from the divine. To follow the Cathar path meant facing these illusions, both outside and within. Ego, pride, pleasures of the body, even holding on to pain, these were all seen as chains. Not chains placed by destiny, but by forgetting who we really are. Breaking them didn't require force, just steady awareness. Still, the Cathars were not hopeless or bitter. Their way was full of quiet love. They believed in healing, in calm, in the simple beauty of a soul living in harmony with its source. Their values didn't come from rules, but from love, a love that pointed beyond the world of form, toward the eternal. In the end, the Cathars weren't trying to run away from life. They were trying to wake up from a dream that most mistake for life. Their final goal wasn't reaching a place called heaven. It was becoming light, pure awareness. But how can we use the wisdom of a group from the Middle Ages in today's noisy, fast world? They lived in small villages, lit candles to pray, and gave up many of life's comforts to free the soul. We live with endless noise, screens, and constant stimulation. Yet their message, the practice of remembering the soul, is more needed now than ever. The Cathars knew that awakening starts with discernment. Today, that means noticing what strengthens your inner light, and what keeps you asleep. 1. Begin with silence. The Cathars didn't use formal prayers. They practiced stillness. Try sitting quietly each day for 10 minutes. No phone, no to-do list. Just your breath. Listen to the space behind your thoughts. Over time, this sharpens your awareness. You begin to hear what the mind forgets. 2. Watch what you take in. The Cathars didn't eat meat, not because they thought they were better, but because they believed it tied the soul to the world. You don't need to change everything overnight. But start paying attention to what you're feeding yourself: food, news, emotions, ideas. Try this for 3 days, avoid anything that stirs craving or dullness: junk food, dramatic media, gossip. See what comes up in that quiet. That discomfort. That stillness. That's the start of remembering. 3. Let go of attachments. The Cathars gave up violence, luxury, and social rank, not to rebel, but to stay clear. Ask yourself, what am I clinging to? Status, approval, identity. Pick just one thing. Try loosening your grip. Not to suffer, but to make room for light. 4. Reclaim the consolamentum within. The outer ritual may be gone, but the soul's turn back to source is still alive. Make your own sacred moment. It could be a walk alone where you speak your heart. Or a whisper before sleep. I choose light over illusion. I choose to remember. Say it with sincerity. You're reigniting something ancient. 5. Live as a light bearer. The perfecti weren't saints. They were reminders, mirrors for others. You don't need special robes or vows. In everyday life, how you speak, how you treat others, how you forgive, you can carry the light. Ask yourself often, am I being a window for light, or a wall that blocks it? 6. Stay alert for modern archons. The Cathars warned about false light. Today, these might show up as systems, movements, or even teachers that seem spiritual but feed control, fear, or ego. Ask, does this path inspire love or fear? Does it want power or freedom? Real light never forces. It gently awakens. 7. Build a circle of remembrance. The Cathars lived in community, not because they had to, but because their hearts were in tune. You don't need a monastery. Just find even one person who speaks from the soul. When two people meet in truth, a sacred space is born. Talk about what really matters. Share your dreams. Protect each other's light. These aren't rules, they're reminders. You're not here to be flawless. You're here to remember you were never truly broken. The Cathar teachings, though buried by time, still whisper. You are light, dreaming your matter. You are free, pretending you're trapped. And every time you choose truth instead of comfort, quiet instead of noise, love instead of illusion, you're walking the Cathar path. Not in their robes, but in your own light. It's been centuries since the flames rose at Montsegur, where the last Cathar stronghold fell, and more than 200 souls walked calmly into the fire. To history, they died as heretics. But to those who remember, they rose as guardians of a deeper truth. A truth no sword, no law, no persecution could ever destroy. Because what they held was never just theirs. It's yours, too. Always has been. The Cathars said this world is a kind of shadow play, a dream mistaken for truth. Real salvation doesn't come from outside, but from waking up the divine spark already inside you. They lived without fear. Devoted to light. Committed to the soul's journey home. Today, their voice returns, not as dogma, but as invitation. Not to run from the world, but to see through it. Not to follow someone blindly, but to truly know. Not to be saved, but to remember, you were never truly lost. In their fall, they planted seeds. Seeds of gnosis, of quiet strength, of luminous clarity. And those seeds are sprouting again. In those who meditate instead of medicate. Who ask questions instead of just obeying. Who search within instead of chasing titles or status. If you've ever felt like this world isn't quite what it seems. If you felt your soul belongs to a light that can't be found in buildings or books. If you've heard a soft echo of a truth too bold to speak. Then maybe, just maybe, you were always meant to find this path. And now, it's time to walk it. Let their memory live through you. In your choices, your awareness, your way of being. Become what they gave their lives to protect. A soul that cannot be caged. A vessel of light. A living reminder that even in the darkest times, truth cannot be burned. If something inside you stirred while hearing this, pause. Reclaim your quiet. Turn toward the light within. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to awaken. Just the courage to remember who you really are. If this journey spoke to you, share it. Leave a comment with what touched you most. And as always, walk gently. Seek deeply. Shine without fear.